My name's Jason Rowntree, Associate Professor of Animal Science at Michigan State University. I oversee 2 research centers for Michigan State, one of which is in the northern part of Lower Michigan, right around Traverse City area. Has anybody been to Traverse area by any chance? Fantastic. Then likewise, I also manage a center up in the Upper Peninsula Research and Extension Center. Across those 2 farms, I've got roughly about 500 to 600 animal units, all a Red Angus base. Our basic cows would have come originally from the 5L herd, and we've since injected some farrow genetics in there. I've done quite a bit of line breeding over the time now. We have done a little bit of AI back to a bull at Rick Calvo's, and so I've been working on that piece. So I came to Michigan State in 2009 and had the opportunity to manage these new centers. And I was on faculty at LSU for 8 or 9 years, or 7 or 8 years, and didn't have the decision-making capabilities I was wanting. And so I had this new opportunity to get these new centers and push them in a different direction. So the first thing, I knew what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it to be a regenerative, pasture-centric type of approach. When I got to Michigan State, the cow herd weighed about 18 to 2,000. They were getting supplemented about 5 to 8 pounds of grain through the wintertime, the replacement heifers. And but you know, not to be critical, but that's what Michigan looks like. It looked like a lot of that in those areas. High feed, a lot of big cows. And so ultimately, I brought in people that knew more than me. You can see Alan and I like to put smarter people around ourselves, and that's why we have Jasmine here. And so I did the same thing, and I brought in, first and foremost, Terry Gompert. And Terry and I worked with our extension staff that are here, Jerry Lindquist, Cable Thurlow, Doug Carmichael. I worked and we came up with a holistic goal at that point. Now we have evolved a little bit and call it a holistic context, but it means the same thing in a lot of ways to me. But the point being is that we formed a holistic goal. And so then our science now has context. Our science is under holistic goal. So that's the first step that we did. And then we had to tear down the whole sunbuck because it was in a very normalized system, haying all summer. All that hay we put up in the summer went out to see the cows in September, October. And so effectively what we did then is we just changed. So the second person I brought in was the guy sitting over right there, Alan Williams. And we had to make a decision on what to do with our genetics. And so we ultimately, as you could imagine, made the decision that it would have taken a long time to get those cows downsized. So we were able to buy out about 10% of the 5L cow herd out in 2010. So I've had those cows now for 7 to 8 years. And so since then, we've been really looking at the research around grass finishing, the research around the carbon footprint of that. And then I'm also interested in beef healthfulness. What do the components in the beef look like? And then I'm hoping to get into the fact of what does that look like in terms of human health. And so this would be a shot of what our development heifers look like. Those are going to be at the Lake City farm where I calve in April and May. Those females, that's going to be probably looking at the grass, probably about early June, right through there. Moderate frame, these cows, as I'll show you, they're going to be at body condition score, you know, 5 or so at weaning. They're going to weigh right at about 1180 to 1200 pounds with a mean age of about 5 is what they're going to weigh. So this is a shot from the Upper Peninsula. Those are going to be falls. I rotated my Upper Peninsula cow herd into fall calving, August, September. The reason is it gives me a lot better symbiosis between a spring calving and a fall calving herd to do research, to do some things. So this shot would have been these heifers right up front. There's a couple of open 2-year-olds that are in there, some of those bigger hip heights. But all these cattle right through there, that's going to be 11-month Red Angus females that were born the prior August, September, maybe 10 to 11 months. They're going to be already, as you can see, they're getting even a little bit of flesh on them. They're probably going to be 850 to 900 pounds right through there. And so that's going to be effectively kind of what our genetic base is looking like. Some other important characteristics on our management is we just kick the bucket on the nitrogen. We quit. We quit fertilizing. We've not given any anthelmintics to these cattle now in 8 or 9 years. I realize my friends in Florida and Louisiana and others, it can be much more difficult, but in our system, it's a little easier. We've monitored fecal egg counts, and typically what we'll see is we'll see a little bit of heavier loads in some of the younger heifers, but then when we get into the cows, they're not there. And so we typically tend to, we haven't used any wormer. We will run into some fluke issues from time to time. That's something we have to deal with in our more wet environment. It's just part of doing business. So the cows, I said 1250, they're really now probably down a little bit. The average weight of our live steers go to market about 1200. That's going to be in about a 19 to 20 month window. A 19 to 20 month window. This data is going to be compiled over about a 5 to 6 year period now. We are seeing around a 650 pound carcass weight, and the average quality grade has been somewhere from slight 50, slight 80, somewhere in there. So mid to 2/3 of the high selects. We are rolling that other cow herd into the fall cow herd. We're going to finish those up to about 2 years of age. I bred half of those to some Akiushis to look at the impact to see if we can really get those cattle to grade prime coming off grass in about a 20 to 22 month window. So that's some of the new research that we're doing. Really cool, hopefully. I gave handouts. I've got 2 separate things, thanks to Cable Thurlow for helping put this together. But I've got 2 budgets for you guys that I put together. Some of y'all that came in probably won't have them. I'll go make more copies and leave it out at our front desk if you'd like. But compiling our 2014 to 2016 data, on those handouts, I have all the superscripts for our prices that we use, everything. But the point I want to make is that we were using over a 3 year period about a 960 pound purchase on a 550. Working through all our numbers, our land costs for rent that we built in, our feed costs. We feed roughly about, it's going to come to about 3,000 to 4,000 pounds of hay in our production cycle. So that's going to be weaning onto a combination of dry hay or baleage. And then we have to supplement maybe about 30 to 50 pounds that we'll see disappear in like November before we finish. We just put a little extra energy out there to help keep them on that increasing weight gain before we stop. So effectively, we're down to, on a 3 year average, I believe our net income is coming somewhere around $415 per head. I can finish in that country on about 1 acre to 1.25 acres. I do have some irrigation costs in there. I did play with some K-line irrigation from time to time. If I use that, I can increase my production by about 30%. So that's going to get me down to about 0.7 acres. But that's really not near as efficient as what a pivot would look like. The K-lines are considerably more labor intensive. Do a hell of a job if you've got a lot smaller acreage. I don't really believe we need irrigation in that country, but it's always a question I get, and I want to be able to give those answers. Tell me when I need to hush, okay? All right. 2016, lower calf prices, right? We're like $1.40 for purchase that year. Working through all our math, our feed costs, we're going to be somewhere, we were netting somewhere around $540 per head based on our numbers. I worked with ag economists at Michigan State, Cable did as well, to get this data put together. So if you look at that data and you're finishing on 1 to 1.5 acres in the upper Midwest, it's a pretty damn good return, is the point. This is what my production season looks like. And this is going to be very comparable, I think, to here in the northeastern United States. We have this huge, massive peak of forage growth in May, June. What we try to do, we haven't really got into these early, like biennial type annuals, but we have looked at the impact of warm season annuals and cool season annuals on filling gaps throughout our grazing season. So that is January and that is December. We will begin to supplement hay. This year and last year, we're now feeding about December. I can show you some endpoint slides there. We market our finished 2-year-olds, our yearlings, and these primarily, a few holdovers, our fallborns. We'll keep our open 2-year-olds and sell them as fats to a local market there. Importantly, and I didn't fail, that these prices are on an average $2.875 carcass weight basis, by the way. So our marketing that we are getting on average for those years was around $2.87, probably closer to $2.50, $2.60. Alan, can you tell me what the prices are right now for a grass-fed beef carcass?
Yeah, they're going to be running about $2.50, depending on the program.
Right. So we have much more localized markets, and that's something we should say. We typically sell in Indiana to Michigan. These are long-term relationships. But likewise, if you remember what prices were looking like in 2014, what were the prices then? Alan, what were in 2014? We're pushing 3, right, or over?
3 and over.
Exactly. So be mindful that those averages incorporated that. It's up to you to get your value. From a standpoint of genetics, forage, these are the 3 things, and I think Alan's going to talk more to this as well. Genetics, forage management, animal handling, and post-carcass. Another person that I had the opportunity to work with quite a bit at our farm has been Jim Garish, and something, and I agree what he says in many regards, is that when it comes to these 2, I think to be successful off the bat in grass finishing is probably 70 to 80% this and about 20 to 30% that. Not to take away from genetics at all, but the fact is if I don't have good high quality forage in front of my cattle every day, it doesn't make a damn what their genotype looks like. They're not going to reach their phenotype. And so I think it's incumbent on us, first of all, to really focus our costs and the way that we expend money on improving our forage bases and our management. And then the fun part is when we get our genetics right as well. And that's where really everything comes together, I think, for a high quality program. I'd say likewise, though, I don't know where this fits in, but these can really wreck you right here. And it's so incumbent to have good relationships with the folks that are killing your cattle and processing, because those things can have tremendous impacts. We know that these cattle, and our premise is we put a lot of pressure on fertility. I do leave bulls in for over 100 days, but I only keep anything that's in that 30 to 45 day window that is bred. Everything else will be marketed as females that are going to calve into the summer months. And so that's something there. And I believe Harlan Ritchie's been a mentor of mine for many years. I know a lot of you guys know Dr. Ritchie. And his premise is if we put pressure on fertility and we get the breeding right, this carcass quality is going to follow. Because at the end of the day, it's all about energy metabolism and how those animals meet their energy requirements and then what they have above and beyond to partition to reproduction or to the compositional maturity that they have. The other component is they have to eat a crap ton of grass. So basically, if you look at University of Missouri data, 1.1% of body weight of NDF. And NDF is neutral detergent fiber. It's a fiber component. Typically, we say then a cow can eat 1.1% of her body weight. So if you had a 1,000-pound cow, that's 11% fiber. If you had 50% fiber in your grass, that's 22 pounds a day. Our cows probably eat closer to 1.5% of their body weight in NDF. So many of the cows that we've monitored, where the books say that they might only be able to eat 22 pounds of this forage, we find ours can eat upwards of 30. And there is definitely a genetic component that goes on. Fred Provenz has done some outstanding work in that regard. So effectively, the cows don't read the books, is the point. And I know Kit and others have used that before, but we've seen these animals that we have to eat an amazing amount of fiber. The other thing is we're cool and we're temperate. So because of those things, we're able to see greater intakes than you were in conditions where animals have to expel considerably more heat. They don't have the overall gut capacity. We shoot for 5,400 pounds a grazing season. That's 30 pounds a day for 180 days a year in our finishing system. I want to keep my NDFs at or below 40 ideally. And again, that's that neutral detergent. It's the amount of fiber in there, and it's very relative to intake. We shoot for at least a 1.25% of body weight on this, but again, I've seen 1.4 to 1.5 on fiber intake. We really shoot for a high percent of legumes in our systems there. So 60 to 70% visual legumes to tall, cool season grasses is what we shoot for in our system. We're highly dependent on alfalfa where we are. And then I've had a lot of data to indicate that you can't slow down in these systems. We've accidentally backward cattle for a month or so. We shoot for a 2-pound weight per day of age from birth to slaughter. When we kick cattle out on May, they're going to gain 3.5 to 4.5. By the time we're crawling home, we're going to be somewhere around 2 to 2.25 based on our performance. So this is going to be some cover crop work. I got 5 minutes. Cover crop work that we've been working on. So one thing I'm very interested in is increasing beef quality through the last 90 days of finishing, 60 days of finishing. So what we did is we designed a trial where we had our regular mixed pasture. We had a simple mixture. Anybody come to MSU for our grass-fed, you would have seen this data, seen some of these crops. So this would have been a complex mixture where we had a combination of Winfred turnips, a giant brassica, cowpeas, annual ryegrass, about 7 to 8 species that are in here. That's going to be a set at this time. That's going to be about a set of 15 to 16-month-old heifers. So you can see in our system, you see the fat that we're depositing around the tailhead. We're doing a good job of getting the cattle ready there. So we had 3 treatments. We had a mixed pasture, we had a simple annual that would have been an oat and a brassica, and then that complex mixture, right? So the key though is that in this system, I can put cattle on half the acreage in the fall that I can on a mixed pasture. It takes twice the acreage to finish one in the fall. I've got about $110 per acre in that right there. About $110 per acre. We come through and look at it after this. That's what it looks like when we leave. And so we've effectively felt like data-wise, we get about 150 stock days an acre, or roughly 4,500 pounds of utilization on that, relatively easy. I do have 30 pounds of nitrogen in that. I have 30 pounds of nitrogen, and I also do a burn-off to do that with Roundup. So we're not organic, but we try to do the best we can in terms of our management. We would never do that to a perennial field. The point for us is that we're transitioning potentially into greater alfalfa stands or for an integrated crop and livestock systems where we are in Michigan. So here's some of the data, and I apologize, I sent this data piece around. So through the first, and this grazing days was wrong. God bless my grad student, but it was wrong. So I caught, it's my fault for not catching it earlier. So the point is that if I look at body weight gain, and likewise I apologize, this is in what we call kilograms, but there's 2.2 pounds in a kilogram. So basically if you look right in through here, our overall average daily gain in that system, 1.2 times 2.2, is going to be approaching 3 right in through there. And this is going to be around the September time of the year. We also put out some dry hay for the cattle. So what I want to show you is that early on when we kicked out to either the simple, the complex, or our mixed pasture, the cattle have a tough time transitioning to those cool seasons. One main mistake I made is I should have had warm seasons in there with them to help them transition easier. I have about half of a butt cheek gone that's in Gabe Brown's stomach. So he let me have it on that decision. But I likewise want to show you is typically after we get a frost, in October, September in our country, we can see amazing gains on that complex system of cover cropping, such that we're getting close to 3 pounds or right around that 3 pound, 2.8, 3 pound average daily gain in October, November in Michigan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is good stuff because we keep those cattle appreciating into a great weight gain. And so we can see that. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about then is if you look at the overall weight, it's fairly comparable as far as the overall production. What we should do in an ideal system is graze this mixed pasture longer. Remember I had on twice the acreage and then transition later into my covers. What I did also see though is that, and I want to point out, is look what happens when I look at hot carcass weight though. So the cattle weighed and performed relatively the same if you look at their weights. 518 kilos, about 1180 somewhere. 500. So the actual on a live weight basis, these mixed had a greater amount of carcass weight than the comp. But when I go back and look at my carcass weights, lo and behold, I've got roughly a 22 to 25 pound increase in overall carcass weight compared to my mixed pasture. Because of the fact that that high energy annual had considerably more energy, there's less gut fill. Okay, there's less gut fill. We got harder gain. And because of that, on that system right there, we're going to be experiencing, if it's a 10 to 15 or a 20 to 30 pound difference, that could be somewhere upwards of $50 to $60 extra a carcass based on what your prices are. So the final thing I'm going to say in hush and give it over to Alan is that when we started, this is what that old farm looked like. The blue bar is cow days an acre. The red bar is the days that we grazed. And then the amount of pairs and yearlings I had on that farm. This is like pre-holistic management, pre-consultant. So we were very similar. So in 2012, the driest year we've had in a decade, we upped our cow days and stock days an acre, a 30-pound increment, about 10 or about 300 pounds more utilization per acre. We grazed about 14, 2 weeks longer. The key though is that, look at my pairs. I went from 190 to over 300 animal units. How do you think I did that? I fenced all my hay ground and I sold all my damn hay equipment. Okay, that's what I did. And so once we did that, we were able to run considerably more animal units on the same amount of land. We typically will grow some hay, but purchase a lot of it. So then in 2015, the point I want to show is before we started, we were at 74 stock days an acre. Now we're at 110. We're actually higher now. But we saw over a 30% increase in utilization and forage growth in 5 years by cutting out our nitrogen, our phosphorus, our lime, a little bit of lime, but almost all our inputs we cut out. We managed our grazing. We added acreage. We added animal units, and I got 30% more utilization across that period of time. Or I inherited 30% more land on type of ground I can finish 1 steer per acre in a grass-fed system. Thank you.